Today's world faces many challenges, and one of them, the war on drugs, has always been an incredibly complex subject, especially in the tremulous relationship between media and the common consumer. In my mind, journalism should serve as a means of spreading truth, and there is nothing worse for the world of investigative media than biased or untruthful journalism. Traditional media has always had a rough relationship with crime and drugs in particular. Perhaps it is because of an obligation to condemn actions they seem as detrimental, or maybe it is something more nefarious. In this presentation, I'd like to focus on the videos of YouTube channels that focus on criminal journalism, in particular Vice and their series that covers crime, such as High Society or Crime Wave, among others. These videos offer a new perspective into the world of crime, one that in my mind would be impossible to perform in a traditional media setting. They also serve as an incredibly effective deterrent. After watching some of these videos, the viewer has no choice but to consider the terrifying ignorance of the people that are involved in this industry. Before we tackle this issue, let us understand clearly the importance of learning about drugs. And to demonstrate, I would like to discuss the North American opioid epidemic, a massive drug crisis that hit the United States and took the lives of hundreds of thousands of lives. To give some perspective on how grave this issue is and how it began, let us watch this short YouTube clip by Vice that talks about the North American opioid crisis and the war on drugs.
In 2018 alone, over 67,000 were killed by drug overdoses. In 2017, it was over 70,000. In 2016, over 63,000. The war on drugs is a Vietnam War every year. Most of these staggering numbers have been driven by what's become known as the North American opioid crisis. But how did we get here? How did a toxic mix of the war on drugs and a profit-driven medical system get us to a place where overdoses now kill more Americans than gunshots or road accidents?
The number we just heard was from 2018. The latest data shows that in 2021, nearly 107,000 people died from drug-related overdoses, a drastic increase from the last few years. Before we delve into the relationship between media and drugs, it is of paramount importance to understand how drugs epidemic happen, what their origins are, and how this particular drug managed to gather such a massive following. In terms of the opioid crisis, the answer is simple and incredibly well explained by Vox, another YouTube channel that covers many topics related to drugs, as well as crime in general.
American doctors started prescribing opioids like Oxycontin, Percocet, and Vicodin at record numbers, and overdoses began spiking. In the 2000s, the government took steps to limit the supply of prescription pills. Pharmaceutical manufacturers were sued for falsely marketing their products as non-addictive. Doctors were prosecuted for overprescribing pain pills, and authorities tightened limits on painkillers. By 2013, prescription drug abuse leveled off as pills became harder to find. But that didn't help Americans who were already hooked. When addicts couldn't get pills, they found more dangerous drugs. It's this transition that has led the opioid crisis to epidemic proportions. The Center for Disease Control found that people addicted to prescription painkillers are 40 times more likely to be addicted to heroin.
With this fundamental knowledge, let us take a look into how traditional media approaches the ever-growing issue of the synthetic drug epidemic that has been spreading around the United States.
Insanity because it often causes hallucinations, aggression, and paranoia. Its effects on the brain last longer, and it can do more damage than cocaine.
Well, what they call it excited delirium. If you recall, back in the 70s and 80s, PCP, LSD, when some people would take these drugs, they would have like superhuman strength. Here in South Florida, we have instances where people have taken Flocka, and it's taken 6 police officers to hold them down. Of course, this presents a lot of problems for law enforcement, a lot of problems for the community, and also the person taking the Flocka.
To compare, let us look at how this issue is approached by Vice.
Flocka is a man-made drug similar to bath salts. Bath salts come from a synthetic cathinone that affects the central nervous system and are designed to mimic the effects of cocaine, methamphetamine, MDMA, or ecstasy. Flocka can be ingested by sniffing, snorting, smoking, or injection. When ingested, dopamine levels in the brain increase, causing feelings of euphoria and heightened alertness. At the same time, a surge of norepinephrine is produced in the brain, raising heart rates and blood pressure, and then causing what doctors call excited delirium, where the body experiences extreme temperatures and paranoia. The mind can start to hallucinate, and this often leads to violent aggression, self-injury, and in some cases, death.
Now let us identify the main differences between these two videos. First of all, it is obvious that Vice uses a more modern system of presenting in which information is coherently presented and aided visually, which helps reach a better understanding of the topic at hand. What I consider to be the main difference between these two styles of presenting is that traditional American media seems to use a form of control by fear. Instead of properly educating the population on drugs, their origin, their effects, and how they are distributed, and the issue that arise from distribution. Instead, they opt for giving just enough of a terrifying description to discourage potential users from picking up the substance, without actually delving into the origins of the problem. In addition, this type of presenting frames people that use these substances as nothing more than junkies, whereas in my mind, addicts should be considered more to have a mental illness than being criminals. Perhaps it comes from my nature to have the need of understanding something before judging it. However, it almost seems like these traditional media programs live in a world of willful ignorance. I would say that this is a form of dehumanizing addicts in order to separate them from the real world, making it easier to accept them as nothing more than tumors of our society, instead of reaching out and helping them get past their addiction. Consider another example. Here is a video from CNN released in 2010. It's an older video, however, all the principles that I previously mentioned still apply. We have to ask ourselves a question. What kind of message does a video like this convey? To me, this message is brimming with a form of pride. Look at how much money is being spent to fight this issue. Now, imagine a world in which all those billions of dollars that were being spent in order to hunt down and incarcerate all of those drug users were instead spent on rehabilitation and various forms of harm prevention. Would that truly be impossible to achieve? However, there is indeed a more nefarious perspective that we can consider. Perhaps traditional mass media outlets are purposefully hiding the origin of the issue. As previously shown, the driving factor behind the opioid epidemic were doctors overprescribing various forms of painkillers. As a result, those with any pain issues had no choice but to seek their pain-killing medication in other ways. Opioids, such as heroin or fentanyl, are significantly more potent than prescription painkillers, which not only means it is more addictive and harder to dose, but as a result, much easier to overdose on. I dislike propagating information that could be considered conspiracy theories. However, the issue is too severe not to mention. Here's a short clip where Mike Papantonio describes the issue with Big Pharma and how major media outlets could cover up the mistakes and lies of massive pharmaceutical companies.
With the exception of CBS, every major media outlet in the United States shares at least one board member with at least one pharmaceutical company. Let me put that into perspective. These board members wake up, they go to a meeting at Merck or Pfizer, then they have their driver take them over to a meeting with NBC to decide what kind of programming that network is going to air. And for those board members who aren't pulling double duty with a media conglomerate in a big drug company, they still understand that they can't be mean to Big Pharma because Big Pharma pays their bills. Drug companies spend about $5 billion a year on advertising with these media outlets. So when you have a case against Pfizer or Merck or Eli Lilly or any of the other major pharmaceutical companies, do you think those board members are going to let you get on the air and tell a story that's bad about what they do?
Regardless of your opinion on the topic of Big Pharma, I believe that people fundamentally do not understand the world of someone who does, produces, buys, or sells drugs. This is most likely the case because most people do not come into contact with these areas in their lives, as they would have to go out of their way to do so. This is exactly where the videos of such modern journalist channels shine. They humanize everyone that takes part in this industry. This is not to say that they excuse them of their actions or that they justify it in any way. They're simply there to share perspectives, help us understand what people are going through in order to form a more accurate conclusion on the topic at hand. Consider this short clip of a Vice reporter talking to a young man who is responsible for selling and distributing drugs to members of his community.
How old are you?
I'm 18.
How long have you been involved in drugs running?
For about 3-4 years.
And what got you involved in that?
The money, man.
And what is it you do on a day-to-day basis in this lifestyle?
When I wake up, I have to go to the block. Show all the people, whatever. If I'm hands-on, I get the drugs, and then I start shotting, which is selling them. If I'm hands-off, I get the drugs and I give it to the youngers, and then they start after day by selling.
How old are these youngers?
Around the age that I started, 14, 15. So
they're kids, basically.
Yeah,
so you're putting kids back on to run a system that you first came into.
Yeah. But it's just the problem is the beef. The things that I've done to people, they're not just going to walk past me and, I have tried to leave it, by the way. After my friend died, I was just like, I'm out. I let everyone know that I'm out. But then I run into people and problems happen. I was with my mum shopping and these guys tried to stop me and my family. I had to retaliate and I just grew from there again.
The wolf you feed is the wolf that gets stronger, innit? But just don't forget where you're coming from and that you had some sort of goals in the beginning.
I still do. I'm going to leave soon and I'm going to use the money to start something.
I hope so. I hope so.
Thank you.
He says it all. It's all about the money. And this is how I see it. An 18-year-old who imagined himself in riches made a simple mistake and got in with the wrong people. Now, as he's already in the game, it is impossible for him to exit, leaving him no choice but to continue. Let us look at a different perspective. Once again, consider this Vice video where Matt Shee, a Vice reporter, talks to some British ecstasy dealers. This time, I would like to show how important it is to consider the distributor's perspective, as it serves a very important role to actually understanding why taking these types of drugs is an incredible risk to everyone.
How pure are your pills and how pure is your mandate?
We have no idea. We just copy from someone and we make sure it's good enough. We take it ourselves.
As in, I'd say that 20% gets cut. All sorts of shit, meths and that.
The pills come from Holland, that's why I know.
They come from Holland.
As we just heard, the dealers have no idea what they are actually selling. As far as they're concerned, it's just money, and every customer of theirs is nothing more than a customer, not even a person. If you were someone that took ecstasy regularly, or even someone who was considering trying it, is this something you would like to get involved with? In my opinion, hearing this type of information coming from the distributors is the greatest deterrent achievable. From the same video, let us take a look into how ecstasy is produced. We will see a clip of two young, let's say, entrepreneurs who explain and show in details the production of an ecstasy pill.
So yeah, it's just, do you know what I mean? So it doesn't come out of a fucking laboratory. People think it's clean and shit. It's just sick. Right, so now we've got 11 grams in here in total, yeah, 3 grams of MDMA and then fucking 8 grams of the binding agent, yeah? So just add a little bit of colour to that. Stick this in here. Whoa. Generally try not to spill in here. Just crank them out like that. It's set well nice, isn't it?
To begin with, as one of the two men said, these are not created in a laboratory. People think it's clean, but of course it is not. Looking at the whole process, using chicken nugget boxes from McDonald's, spilling half of the product on the ground while using dirty equipment, barely measuring anything while creating the pill. Once again, it is quite obvious that these people and the products they sell are ridiculously unsafe. How would one even consider taking one of these pills after knowing where they come from and how they are created? As I mentioned before, investigative journalism should stand as a beacon of truth, a never-ending well of information that allows us to make knowledgeable, comprehensive opinions about the various difficult topics in our world. Despite the failures of most traditional media outlets, I believe there is hope for a better future in the world of journalism, although this will require people to become more open-minded and accepting of different perspectives.